At 5:38 in the morning, Marta Keil put 2 white tablets in the pocket of her apron. Not bandages, not scissors, not a thermometer. 2 tablets, enough, she believed, to keep the Americans from deciding how her life would end. Outside the dairy barn that had become a field hospital, the first U.S. jeeps rolled through the wet grass with their headlights dimmed. Spring fog sat low over the fields near Selly, turning every helmet and rifle into a gray shape moving toward the door. Marta watched from an upstairs window and counted them the way nurses counted blood loss. Carefully, quickly, without emotion. 13 jeeps, 6 ambulances, 2 trucks loaded with infantry. Too many men to resist. She was 35 years old, a senior nurse in a German military hospital that had been operating out of borrowed farm buildings since the previous autumn. The brick dairy still smelled faintly of sour milk beneath the sharper smells of iodine, fever, and linen that had been washed too many times. Inside, 132 wounded German soldiers lay on straw mattresses and narrow iron beds. Some were missing limbs, some had burns. Some stared at the rafters with the fixed, empty expression of men whose bodies had survived faster than their minds could follow. 3 doctors remained. One had a tremor in his hands, one was 71. One had not taken off his boots in 4 days. 23 nurses moved between the rows with the quiet speed of women who had learned to do medicine after medicine itself had started running out. Marta turned from the window. Greta Lenz stood beside a table of rolled bandages, trying to make her hands obey her. She was 21, a baker's daughter from Würzburg, with pale hair tucked badly under her cap and a face that still looked too young for the things she had learned to clean. Across the room, Hildebrandt was holding a basin as if she had forgotten why she had picked it up. She was 19, from Hamburg, her father gone in Russia, her mother buried somewhere under a collapsed street she could no longer find on any map. Neither girl spoke. They had spoken all night. There was nothing left to say. For months, party officials had come to the hospital with the same warning. The Americans will not respect you as medical personnel, they will say you serve the Wehrmacht. They will make examples of you. They will punish nurses first. Because nurses can testify to what they saw. The message changed slightly each week, but the ending never changed. If they come, you will wish you had died before they reached you. Marta had not believed everything the official said. She was not a child, but she had worked through Poland, Belgium, and the long retreat west. She had seen what armies did when they were tired, angry, and unobserved. She had seen German men commit acts that did not require propaganda to explain. So when the rumor reached the hospital that American troops were 12 kilometers away, Marta had unlocked the medicine cabinet, removed a small paper packet, and divided its contents among the nurses. She told them only once, "Do not use this unless there is no other choice." Greta had nodded with tears on her face. Hild had taken the tablets without blinking. Now, the Americans were in the yard, and Marta's fingers were in her apron pocket, touching the smooth edges of what she had prepared. The front door opened. It was not kicked in. That was the first thing that did not fit. A young American officer stepped into the ward with a white cloth tied to his rifle barrel. He stopped just inside, removed his helmet, and looked around the room. He did not look like a man entering enemy territory. He looked like a man entering a hospital. There was a difference. Marta noticed it before she knew what to do with it. The officer spoke in careful German. "Who is responsible for the patients?" No one moved. Marta stepped forward, because 12 years in uniform had trained her to answer before fear could embarrass her. "I am." The officer looked at her apron, her blood-stained sleeves, the rows of wounded men behind her.
Then he said the sentence that split the morning in two. "Then you will continue your work." Marta waited for the rest. The insult. The threat. The hidden order. It did not come. The officer continued, slower now, as if he understood that the words were having trouble entering the room. "Medical personnel are protected. Wounded men are protected. We will take control of the site, but the patients remain patients. The patients remain patients." Marta had heard thousands of official sentences in her life. Most of them were built to hide something. This one was too plain to hide behind. A wounded corporal near the stove began to cry without making a sound. Greta's hand came out of her apron pocket. Empty. Hilda set the basin down so gently it made no noise at all. The officer turned to his men and gave orders in English. 2 soldiers moved to the door, but they did not raise their rifles. Another took a notebook from his pocket and began writing down the number of beds. Marta stood where she was. For the first time since dawn, she realized she was still breathing. By noon, the yard outside the dairy had changed into something that looked less like conquest than inventory. American medics marked doors with chalk, drivers reversed ambulances into place. A soldier with red hair carried a stack of blankets through the mud, and apologized in English when he dripped water across the floor. Marta did not understand the words. She understood the apology. At 1 in the afternoon, 2 crates were brought in and placed beside the old cream separator. The nurses approached them cautiously. Inside was bread. Not the dark ration brick they had been cutting into slices thin enough to see through, real bread. White at the torn edge, soft enough to press with a thumb. There were tins of meat, sacks of sugar, coffee, soap, powdered milk, and butter. Wrapped in waxed paper. Butter. Greta stared at it as if it were evidence from another planet. Marta did the calculation automatically. The portions being handed to the nursing staff amounted to more than 2,000 calories per person. For most of the winter they had been living on 900, sometimes less, and telling each other fatigue was a professional weakness. Hilda took her piece of bread and placed half of it in her pocket. Marta saw it. She said nothing. There are habits hunger teaches that no victory announcement can remove. That night, the nurses slept in the same ward as the wounded because none of them trusted the silence outside. Greta whispered that perhaps the food was meant to soften them before interrogation. Hilda whispered back that if the Americans wanted confessions, they could have started by asking questions. Marta lay awake with the tablets still in her apron. She had not thrown them away, not yet. Because fear does not disappear when contradicted. It waits. It asks for more proof. The proof began arriving in small, inconvenient pieces. The next morning, an American medic helped Dr. Voss lift a patient with a shattered hip. He did not ask which unit the man had served in, he asked where the wound was worst. Later, a private found Greta crying behind the dairy after a soldier died during dressing change. The private stood there helplessly for a moment, then offered her a cigarette with the awkward seriousness of a man offering the only comfort he owned. She did not take it. But she remembered the hand. By the 3rd day, the Americans announced that the hospital staff would be transferred to a registration center outside Hanover. Marta had prepared herself for freight cars. The transport was covered trucks with benches. 2 guards rode in the back. One fell asleep before they had left the farm lane. The other shared chewing gum with Hilda, then looked embarrassed when she did not know what it was. Through gaps in the canvas, the nurses saw Germany passing in pieces, burned-out vehicles in ditches. Villagers standing beside roads with bundles in their arms, American supply convoys moving in both directions as if the country had become one long corridor of fuel, flour, steel,
and orders. At a crossroads, they passed a depot stacked with crates higher than a man's head. Medical crates, food crates, blankets bound in canvas, fuel drum lined in rows so exact they seemed drawn with a ruler. Marta watched them go by. For years she had been told the Americans were soft and wasteful, incapable of sacrifice, a people made weak by comfort. What she saw was not weakness, it was abundance, organized into motion. And it frightened her more than cruelty would have. Cruelty she understood. This was stranger. This was an army that could afford not to be desperate. The registration center had once been a Luftwaffe training school. The German eagle was still above the main gate, but an American sign hung below it, mailed in place so quickly the paint was still uneven. Inside, everything happened with clerical speed. Names, ages, units, medical training, vaccination marks, health examination, issue number, bunk assignment. No shouting. No staged humiliation. No one asking Marta to denounce anyone. No one telling Greta she was lucky to be alive, though all of them knew it. In the medical room, an American doctor examined Marta's hands. He turned them palm up, noticed the scars, the cracked skin, the old burn at the base of her thumb. Through an interpreter, he asked, "How long have you been nursing?" 12 years. He nodded once, and wrote it down. That was all. Marta wanted to ask what the note meant, but pride stopped her. Fear had taken enough from her. It would not get her curiosity, too. The nurses were placed in a barracks with wooden bunks, heavy blankets, and a stove that actually worked. Each woman received soap, a comb, a toothbrush, and a towel that had never been used to cover a wound. Greta stood holding the soap in both hands. Real soap had a smell the body remembered, before the mind did. Clean. Plain. Almost indecent. Hilda sat on the edge of her bunk and looked at the room. "I don't understand what they want," she said. Marta looked through the window at American soldiers carrying crates across the yard. "Neither do I. So we will watch." Watching became their occupation before nursing did. They watched the guards, who were bored rather than predatory. They watched the officers, who seemed most annoyed by missing paperwork. They watched the mess hall, where German prisoners received food from the same steaming pots as the guards, though at different tables. The first dinner was stew thick with potatoes and meat, bread, coffee, and half an apple. Greta ate the apple last, one narrow slice at a time, as if discipline could make it last longer. Hilda did not eat hers at all. She wrapped it in a napkin and kept it under her pillow. Marta drank the coffee and realized halfway through the cup that her hand had stopped shaking. That irritated her. She was not ready for her body to forgive what her mind had not approved. On the 5th day, a major named Edwin Harrow came to the barracks with an interpreter and a folded paper in his hand. He did not give a speech about democracy. He did not ask them to admire America. He did not pretend the war had been clean. He said, "We have too many patients and too few nurses." The interpreter repeated it. "The hospital 2 miles south of here is treating American wounded, German wounded, and civilians. We are asking for volunteers. You will work under supervision. You will be paid in camp vouchers. You may refuse." The room became very still. Volunteers. The word was almost insulting in its strangeness. Hilda asked, "And if we refuse?" The interpreter spoke to the major. Major Harrow looked directly at her. "Then you refuse." Marta felt something shift in the room, not trust, not yet, but the first failure of a certainty. Greta raised her hand because she was young enough that usefulness still felt like an answer to terror. Hild raised hers because she wanted to see the trick from inside it. Marta raised hers last. She told herself it was to protect the younger nurses. That was only partly true. The larger truth was harder to admit. The work had called her by name. 3 mornings later, 6 German nurses walked into an American field hospital set up in a schoolhouse and 3 long canvas wards.
The head nurse was Captain Ruth Mallory, 40 years old, square-shouldered, with dark hair pinned under her cap, and the most practical face Marta had ever seen. Captain Mallory looked over the German nurses, then spoke through the interpreter. "I don't care what uniform taught you. I care whether you can keep people alive." Marta almost smiled. At last a language no government owned. Greta was sent to recovery. Hilda was sent to intake. Marta was assigned to Ward C, where the most serious cases lay. The first thing she noticed was the bed order. American, German, American, French civilian, German, American. Not by nationality, by severity. She walked down the line and checked the charts, because she did not trust her eyes.
A German sergeant with abdominal wounds was receiving the same penicillin schedule as an American corporal with shrapnel in the lung. A civilian girl with sepsis had a chart reviewed twice a day. A German artilleryman was listed for surgical follow-up beside 2 U.S. infantrymen. Marta checked again. The second check betrayed the first. The treatment was equal, not perfect, not sentimental, not theatrical, equal. That disturbed her more deeply than insults would have. Insults would have kept the world organized. This required rebuilding it. A young American nurse named Alice Kenner found Marta staring at the chart rack. Alice was 24, red cheeked from the cold, and moved with the cheerful exhaustion of someone who had accepted that every day would ask for more than a normal person should give. She pointed to the chart, then to the medication schedule, speaking slowly in English. Marta caught only some words: dose, morning, night, change, temperature. The rest she understood from fingers, columns, marks, and the old international grammar of wounds. When Alice finished, she smiled and tapped the chart with 2 fingers. "System," she said. Marta repeated it carefully, "System." Alice nodded, pleased, and went to answer a patient calling from the far bed. Marta stood with the chart in her hand and listened. Boots on schoolhouse floorboards, metal trays, coughing, a truck outside reversing through mud, someone laughing too loudly in the next ward and being told to shut up. It sounded like a military hospital. But without the particular German sound she had grown used to in the last year. No shortage panic under every instruction. No hidden arithmetic behind every dose. No officer deciding a patient was useful or finished. By the end of the week, Marta knew Ward C. She knew which patient hid pain to look brave, which fever climbed after midnight, which German boy panicked if he woke and heard English before German, which American corporal cursed anyone who changed his bandages and apologized afterward every time. Captain Mallory watched Marta without seeming to watch her. On the 7th day, she stopped beside Marta at the nurse's station. The interpreter leaned in. "Captain says you notice things early." Marta waited. "She says that saves trouble." Marta gave a small nod. "She wants you on the midnight assessments." For the first time in months, Marta felt something close to professional pride without shame attached to it. Midnight assessments were not dramatic. There were no speeches in them, no medals. No one thanked you for catching a pulse changing under your fingers or hearing the beginning of fluid in a patient's breathing before it became obvious. But that was nursing, not the grand rescue. The noticing, the refusal to let small changes become fatal just because no one had the patience to see them. Greta found her footing in the recovery ward more slowly. The men there were not dying quickly enough to terrify everyone, which meant they had time to be bored, bitter, needy, funny, ashamed, and impossible. An American private named Daniel Pike had a leg wound that was healing properly and a face too open to hide curiosity. For 3 days he watched Greta carry trays, change dressings, and avoid conversation. On the 4th day he held out a pencil. "German," he said. Then he pointed to himself, to her, and to the paper. Greta understood. She wrote 3 words. Guten Morgen, danke, bitte. Good morning, thank you. Please. He repeated them with such violence against the German language that Greta laughed before she could stop herself. The sound shocked her, not because laughter was forbidden, because it had returned without asking permission. Private Pike grinned as if he had won something. That evening Greta told Marta and Hilda about it in the barracks. Marta said, "Be careful." Greta looked down at her hands. "I am." "No," Marta said, softer. "Be careful even when it feels ordinary." Greta nodded. Hilda, from her bunk by the stove, said, "Maybe ordinary is what we have to learn again." No one answered. The line stayed in the room. Hilda's work in intake was faster, harsher, and less forgiving than Greta's. Patients arrived without warning. Wounds were ugly, fevers high, paperwork incomplete, and language often useless. Her supervisor was Sergeant Clara Reeves from Chicago, who had no German, no patience for confusion, and a talent for making herself understood with gestures sharp enough to cut string. For 2 days, Clara demonstrated and Hilda followed. Tie this. Hold here. Not there. Pressure. Again. Faster. On the 3rd day, American soldiers brought in an old German woman from a farmhouse east of the road. She had pneumonia, malnutrition, and the eyes of someone who had spent weeks expecting every knock on the door to be the final one. When Hilda approached, the woman seized her wrist. "Are they going to take me away?" Hilda looked at the American staff moving around the room, then she looked back at the woman. "No." "How do you know?" "Because I am still here," Hilda thought. "Because I was told they would kill me, and instead I have been issued socks. Because I was told they had no laws, and I have watched them argue over charts. Because I do not know what to believe anymore, but I know what has happened in front of my eyes." She said only, "I am German, I am a nurse. Stay still and breathe." The woman kept her grip for several minutes, then, slowly, she let go. After the patient was stabilized, Sergeant Reeves touched Hilda's shoulder once. "Good," she said. Hilda knew that word now. She had learned it faster than almost any other. Good. A small word, a dangerous word. A word that made the lie visible. Because if the enemy could say good and mean it, then the world was not arranged the way she had been told. The supply room undid Marta. Not all at once. At first she avoided looking too closely. Professional dignity can survive almost anything except comparison. But midnight rounds took her past the shelves every night. Penicillin in labeled boxes. Sterile bandages stacked in towers. Morphine locked properly but available. Clean sheets folded by size. Soap. Surgical gloves. Needles that did not need to be boiled and reused until the metal dulled. Every other morning, more arrived. Not as a miracle, as routine. That was the violence of it, routine abundance. Marta had spent the winter deciding who could wait. Who could survive another night without antibiotics? Whose bandage could be turned inside out and used again? Whose pain was bearable enough to save morphine for the man screaming louder? She had made those decisions calmly, because panic wasted energy. Now she stood in an American supply room at 2:14 in the morning, and stared at 26 boxes of penicillin. 26. She thought of a boy named Otto Fischer, 22 years old, who had died in February, from an infection in a wound that should not have killed him. She remembered his mother's address because she had written it twice on the notification form. She remembered the smell of the wound. She remembered the way he apologized for taking too long to die. 26 boxes. Marta closed the supply room door. She continued her rounds. She did not cry. Crying would have been too simple. By the end of April, the 3 nurses had stopped asking whether the Americans would reveal themselves as monsters. The question had changed. That was worse. Now they asked what it meant that the monsters had not appeared. At night, in the barracks, they spoke in careful circles. Greta said Private Pike had told her his cousin died in the Ardennes. He did not say it to accuse her. He said it because she had asked why he kept a photograph under his pillow. Hild said Sergeant Reeves never mentioned politics, but always checked the German civilian patients twice. Marta said nothing for a long time, then she said, "They do not need to be cruel." Greta looked up. Marta continued, searching the sentence as she spoke it. They have food, fuel, medicine, transport, command, time. When an army has those things, cruelty becomes a choice, not a reflex. Hild said, and they are choosing less of it than we were told. Less of it, not none. None would have been childish, but less than the story allowed. Less than fear required. On May 8, the news reached the hospital at 3:20 in the afternoon. Germany had surrendered. Unconditionally. The sound outside began as a shout near the motor pool, then widened across the compound. Men ran. Someone fired a flare. A clerk sat down on the steps and wept into both hands. Inside Ward C, Marta was taking a temperature. The patient was a German lieutenant with a fever of 38.9. He heard the cheering and looked at her. "What is it?" Marta watched the thermometer a moment longer, because work gave her something to hold. Then the interpreter appeared at the ward entrance, breathless. "It's over." The lieutenant closed his eyes. Across the ward, an American soldier with his arm in a sling began laughing and could not stop. Marta wrote 38.9 on the chart. She adjusted the sheet, checked the pulse, moved to the next bed. History had arrived, but the drips still needed watching. Later, Greta found her behind the schoolhouse. Greta's face was red from crying. "Do you feel relieved?" she asked. Marta looked toward the road, where an American flag moved in the wind over the gate that had once belonged to the Luftwaffe. "I feel unemployed by certainty." Greta did not understand. Marta barely understood it herself. For 12 years, certainty had told them who was strong, who was weak, who mattered, who could be spent, who deserved fear, who deserved pity, and which deaths were necessary. Now certainty had signed a surrender document and left them holding the consequences. The weeks after surrender brought a different kind of war into the hospital. Not bullets. Aftermath, children with infected lungs, old men with untreated wounds, women who had not eaten properly since winter. Civilians who had hidden in cellars so long daylight made them nervous. Soldiers from both sides, whose bodies had survived, but whose eyes still looked toward explosions no one else could hear. The first child assigned to Marta was 8 years old and silent. His name was Emil. He had been found in a farmhouse, with no adults in it. He had a chest infection, a fever, and the thinness of a child whose hunger had become structural. Marta had not worked with children since her training. Military nursing had taken that softness away first. Or so she had believed. Emil watched her prepare the injection with solemn suspicion. She explained each motion in German: needle, medicine, arm, quick. He did not speak. When the injection was done, he did not cry. That was what hurt. A child who cries still expects the world to answer. Emil only watched. The next day, Private Pike came through the ward on crutches and stopped at the boy's bed. He produced a small piece of chocolate from his pocket and held it out. Emil looked at the chocolate, then at Marta, then at Pike, permission had become part of his hunger. Marta nodded. Emil took the chocolate with both hands and held it against his chest. Pike said in terrible German, "Bitte." This time, Greta was not there to laugh at him, Marta did it for her. Just once. Quietly, enough that Emil looked up. The boy did not smile. But his face began arranging itself around the possibility. Chocolate wrapper crinkling softly, that evening, Hilda said Marta was different with the children. Marta denied it. Hilda waited, Marta folded a blanket she did not need to fold.
Then she said, "I had a brother. He was 9 when the bombing took our street." Greta stopped moving. Hilda said nothing. Silence, they had learned, could be a form of care when it did not demand payment. Marta placed the blanket on the shelf and looked at her hands. "I thought the war had used that part of me." "It did not," Hilda said. Marta wanted to argue, she could not. Summer came quietly. The hospital changed again, fewer fresh wounds. More fever, more hunger, more paperwork, more questions nobody could answer about zones, families, trains, houses, graves, and whether a letter sent into ruin could find anyone alive to receive it. The German nurses kept working. They were not free, they were not exactly prisoners in the old shape of the word either. They were something in between, and the space between was where all the difficult thinking lived. Greta received English lessons from Private Pike, and, in exchange, taught him German phrases he used with catastrophic confidence. Hild began keeping a notebook. At first it was for vocabulary. Bandage, pulse, pressure, permission, volunteer, careful, again. Then the words became sentences. I was wrong about the door. I was wrong about the first morning. I was wrong, and being wrong kept me alive. Marta kept no diary. She kept a clinical log. Date, temperature, supplies received, staffing levels, notable patient changes. One evening in July, she added a sentence that did not belong. Observed. Medicine works differently when the person in the bed is not required to deserve it. She stared at the line for a long time. Then she closed the book. In December, Captain Mallory posted a notice outside the mess. Christmas dinner. All hospital staff. All staff included the German nurses. Marta read the notice twice. Greta wanted to go immediately. Hilda said, "I hate that I want to go." Marta said, "We are still under guard." Greta said, "Yes." Hilda said, "And still hungry for something besides food." That ended the argument more effectively than agreement would have. On December 25th, the mess hall smelled of pine, coffee, roasted turkey, cinnamon, and candle wax. The smell struck Marta at the door, not because it was beautiful, because it was pre-war. For 1 second she was 23 again, home for Christmas leave, listening to her mother complain that the apples had been cut too thick for the cake. Then the memory vanished, and she was back in the American mess hall with a borrowed dress under her coat, and a guard near the entrance pretending not to watch the German table. The room held doctors, nurses, orderlies, drivers, clerks, and patients well enough to sit upright for an hour. Private Pike waved Greta over as if the geometry of victory and defeat had become too boring to observe. They sat near the window. The meal arrived in courses: turkey, potatoes, carrots, bread, pie, coffee with real sugar. Marta ate slowly. She had learned not to apologize to food. After dinner, Captain Mallory stood with a glass in her hand. The room settled. She spoke in English, pausing for the interpreter. To the ones far from home. The glasses rose. To the ones who did not get here. The room changed around that sentence. Quieter, heavier.
And to the nurses who came to us as enemies and did the work as colleagues. Marta did not lift her glass at first. Colleagues. The word had weight because it cost the speaker something. Dr. Samuel Reed stood from the surgeon's table and walked toward her. He was 46, narrow-faced, exacting, and so economical with praise that one nod from him could sustain an entire night shift. Marta knew his younger brother had been killed in Normandy, everyone knew. Hospitals collect grief the way wool collects smoke. Dr. Reed stopped at the German table. He looked at Marta. "Nurse Keil," he said. The interpreter began to move closer, but Marta raised a hand. She could understand enough now. "I wanted to thank you, doctor," Reed continued. "You are one of the best nurses I have worked with. That is not a courtesy, it is a fact." He held out his hand. Marta looked at it. She knew what German guns had done to his family. She knew what her work had sustained. Not directly, not simply, but enough. Cause and consequence were rarely clean, but they were not imaginary. She stood. She took his hand. Her voice, when it came, was steady. "Thank you, doctor. I will remember this hospital." He nodded once. "Good. Germany is going to need nurses who remember better ways to do things." Then he returned to his table. Marta sat down slowly. Under the table, Hilda reached for her hand. 8 months earlier, neither of them would have permitted such a gesture. Now Marta let it stay. The orders came in January. The German nurses would be transferred by train through the British zone, then released to regional medical offices as labor and transport allowed. No one pretended the process would be simple. Germany was broken into zones, forms, shortages, ruins, rumors, and lines that changed before anyone finished drawing them. On the last afternoon, Captain Mallory gathered the 6 German nurses in Ward C. She gave each of them a parcel. Bandages, soap. A small medical text in English. A typed reference letter with the hospital seal. When she reached Marta, she held the parcel a moment longer. "Take the system with you," she said. Marta understood. Not the American system. Not the uniforms. Not the flags.
Not the victory. The system beneath it. Patients sorted by need. Supplies counted so they could be used, not hoarded into uselessness. Pain treated as information, not weakness. Skill respected even when it arrived from the wrong side of a war. The person in the bed allowed to remain a person. Marta placed the parcel in her bag. "I will." The train left on a gray morning with frost silvering the rails. Greta sat by the window with an address in Ohio folded inside her glove, written in Private Pike's careful German. Hilda wrote in her notebook. Not vocabulary now. A letter to the 19-year-old girl who had stood in the Derry hospital, with death in her pocket. "You were certain," she wrote. "You were certain because certainty had been handed to you by men with offices, flags, and maps. You were certain, and you were wrong. Remember that wrongness, it saved you." Marta watched the hospital disappear behind a line of bare trees. The schoolhouse, the wards, the supply shed. The road where trucks had come every other morning with more medicine than she had once believed existed in one country. In her bag were bandages and soap and a letter that might help her find work. Those things mattered, but they were not the heaviest things she carried. She carried the first American officer stepping through a door he did not kick open. She carried Greta laughing over a butchered German word. She carried Hilda telling a terrified old woman, "You are safe here," and discovering the sentence was true. She carried 26 boxes of penicillin and the names of the men who had died when there had been none. She carried Emil, holding chocolate against his chest like proof. And she carried the shame of having survived a lie. Not because she had been foolish. Because the lie had been large enough to live inside, large enough to organize a country, large enough to put tablets in the pockets of nurses. When the train reached the junction, the 3 women stepped down onto the platform.
Greta's train would go south, Hild's west, Marta's north, toward a city that existed now mostly in reports, smoke, and memory. For a moment, they stood together with their bags at their feet. No one knew how to say goodbye to people who had witnessed the exact shape of your undoing. Greta embraced Marta first. Then Hild. Then the loudspeaker cracked overhead, and the moment ended because history never gives enough time for the human part. Marta boarded her train and found a seat beside a cracked window. As the platform slid away, she put her hand in her apron pocket. The tablets were not there. She had thrown them into the hospital stove the night after Christmas. She had watched them blacken, curl, and disappear. It had not felt dramatic at the time, only practical. A thing no longer needed should not be carried. Outside, Germany moved past in ruins and winter fields. Marta looked at it without the old certainty and without the comfort of a new one. That, she thought, would have to be enough. She was going back to a country that needed medicine, truth, and people willing to begin with what was real. She could not repair the war. She could not resurrect the men who died for lack of supplies. She could not make herself innocent by working well now. But she could enter the next ward without asking which uniform had brought the patient there. She could count pulse before politics, meed before worth, breath before blame. And when anyone came to her again with perfect certainty, wearing a uniform, carrying a flag, speaking as if fear were proof, Marta would remember the morning she waited to die. She would remember the door opening gently. She would remember that the first crack in the lie was not mercy, it was procedure. A wounded man remained a patient, a nurse remained a nurse. And the tablets in her pocket were wrong.